Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. We have a fantastic speaker. I know students will be streaming in and out. That's not about you. That's about their class. I want to introduce David and Wendy Dorkin. They are members of the Kogod Advisory Committee, which is the highest level advisory committee for the school. Thank you for your service. They have a son here too, Spencer, who is sadly graduating. Thanks everybody for coming, and Professor Ali Sanadi, thank you very much for facilitating a dialogue that Pete did with some students before. So we have a wonderful speaker here who was a chemistry major at Duke, went to Harvard Business School, where he received the highest level accolades and scholarship, then went to another private equity firm called GTCR, and then has been at KKR for 20 years. And there he runs the largest private equity business in the world. So we have basically one of the most senior, most significant, most important investors in the world speaking here at Kogod today, which is wonderful. KKR has 650-ish billion in assets, up or down given the day, probably down a little today, but they're long-term investors, and they're in multiple businesses. And one of the reasons that I wanted to have Pete Stavros here was not only his seniority and experience in investing, but also because he is changing the thinking around employee ownership and access, creating more equitable access to capital for not just the wealthiest and the most senior employees or leaders in a company, but everybody, and so we'll talk about that today. And for that work, he was featured recently on 60 Minutes, which you all can YouTube. So thank you for being here, and welcome to the Kogod School of Business at American University. So let's start with your background. You didn't grow up in a financial family. Your dad was in the construction business and was a union worker. So how did you go from that experience into the highest levels of finance?
And if I talk loud enough, do I still need this, you think? Still use it, okay. God, it was a random walk. My folks didn't go to college, so I certainly didn't have a plan to end up on Wall Street. I got into Duke off the wait list. Duke had a huge priority for first-gen college kids, and my sister was there, and I still barely got in. But once I got in, I studied, as you said. I thought I wanted to be this was so stupid. My uncle was a patent attorney and he had a lot of money, and I didn't want to be poor, and I was like, I'm going to be a patent attorney. And so he said, well, study a science, and I was reasonably good at chemistry, so that's what I studied. And then coming out of Duke, I had spent a year at Oxford doing, I'm going to try not to make this too long. I spent a year at Oxford doing only chemistry, so I was in the lab 30 hours a week, and I decided I did not like that. So then I came back and I rushed together some applications for business jobs, and I really wanted to go into consulting, but I didn't get any jobs in consulting. So I only got one job offer, which was at the old Salomon Brothers, which is now no longer in existence. It got acquired by Smith Barney and Travelers Group and became Salomon Smith Barney, but that was my only opportunity. Did not want to go to Wall Street. I'd heard about the hours and how difficult that lifestyle was, but like I said, it was my only opportunity, so I took it. And then within 2 years of being there, this gentleman named Bob Cotter, who ran the mergers and acquisitions group that I was in, came up to me and said, hey, there's this private equity firm called Vestar Capital. They're looking for young analysts. They've never hired young people before. And they're really nice people, and I think you'd fit in and you should go see them. So I went and saw them, and that day they gave me an offer. It was like, this was such a different time in private equity. And so I did that. I wanted to actually stay, but there were three of us. This will be about all my failures along the way. There were three of us who were analysts together, and there was only one job spot, and I didn't get it. So I went to business school, and then this was at Harvard Business School, and I was coming out right around 9/11. So 9/11 hits, and we're all prepared to go look for jobs, and everyone cancels on campus recruiting. So I sent out probably, at that time there were maybe 100 like decently sized private equity firms, and now there's how many thousands? Yeah. And I sent resumes to every single one. and I got one job offer by the skin of my teeth with a really good firm called GTCR. And then KKR, we worked with KKR on a deal, and they called me back when the firm had 100 people. I don't even know how big it was. And then I just kind of worked my way up over time from there.
All right, let's shift. By the way, you all can ask questions about private equity, but let's shift to employee ownership and kind of which is your mission now. In your typical publicly traded company, what percentage of the employees there, ranging from the CEO to the person in the mailroom, own equity?
So we don't know, and this is something I was working on. The SEC commissioner, the former one, Gary Gensler, was talking about human capital disclosures. He wanted more disclosures about inside of a company, what's going on with its people. I wrote a white paper for him on, I would like us to request of public companies data around worker safety, ownership, because all you really know about employee ownership is how big are the aggregate plans and what do the named executive officers have. That's all we know. So, answer is we don't know. Anecdotally, we have bought public companies. I'm not exaggerating. I don't want to say too much to give away what company this was. There was one person with stock in the entire company, the CEO. That was it. I would say in general, it's between 1% and 5%. Very high end would be 10%. If you were to say what's the most common you've seen where you've either bought the company or gotten enough access to information to figure out what percent, it's between 1% and 3%.
That's actually shocking. I thought it would be in the 30s or 40s. So
I'm not including 401k, to be clear. This is just equity grants.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
Incentive equity grants.
And so in a typical public company, you have CEO, senior vice presidents, directors. What level does ownership typically cut off at? Meaning, at what level do you have to be in a company to get stock grants?
Well, I have the most direct personal experience with manufacturing companies. So let me just talk about manufacturing. In a manufacturing company, somewhere between 60 and 80% of employees are workers. They're in distribution centers, they're in factories, or they're maybe in the back office. These are not highly compensated individuals. It's zero for them, like none, no ownership ever at that level. So now you're really talking about, of that top, let's say 20%, what percent of those participate? And I would say it's like 1 in 4. So that means you're talking about the CEO, the C-suite, as we would call it L2, and then that might be it.
That's it, okay. And what got you interested in this? I mean, most financial executives are not, they're mostly interested in continuing to make money and continuing to grow their, what drew you to be interested in the concept of employee ownership?
Oh God, I'll try not to make this too long of a story. So you mentioned my dad was a construction worker. It was not a happy job for my dad. There was lots of conflict between his union, which was called Local 150, and operating engineers. My dad operated a road grader, between the workers and the company. And the fights were often about time, hours paid. So if you're an hourly worker, as roughly half of Americans are, you have a very strange incentive to not be too productive. Because if you're too productive, your hours go down and your paycheck follows. And that was at the heart of a lot of conflict. You know, it led to the employer understanding employees had kind of weird incentives, so they watched them like a hawk. And then that led to that lack of trust, certainly people felt and rebelled against. And so I have lots of stories about this, but I'll just share one. You know, my dad one day was home early, and what had happened was they were whittling away the paid hours. So at one point they were paying people to drive to the job site. So my dad sometimes would drive an hour and a half to the construction site in the morning, hour and a half home. They used to pay for that time, and then they stopped. They said, well, you know, we're not going to pay you until you start working. And without adjusting the hourly wage, you're obviously really eating into people's income. So what they then next said was, well, we're not going to pay you during the lunch hour. And so in reality, my dad and his colleagues actually pretty much worked the lunch hour. They would brown bag their lunch, and to keep a job going, you're always accepting deliveries. There's always stuff going on. You're not really just like sitting down doing nothing. So what my dad, who was a kind of a bit of the leader of the gang, that, so to speak. What he did was he was friends with the people who drove the road aggregate trucks that delivered the material. And he said, why don't you deliver the road aggregate right at lunchtime? And they were also union, so they kind of conspired to have it delivered at a time where my dad was not working.
Right.
So he refused delivery, ran the job out of material, shut the job down to get the management team's attention, who freaked out. It was a huge fight. And that was a very vivid memory of my dad saying, we got to do something about the incentives. And his dream was worker ownership. You know, shouldn't there be a stake in the business so that employees care about productivity and doing the job on time, doing it right the first time? So in my own narrow life, my dad was the original kind of employee ownership advocate. Subsequent to that, I won't take you through the whole life story here, but I just had some random experiences that led me deeper down this rabbit hole. When I became an investor, I mentioned at that firm, Vestar Capital, the second thing they had me work on was an ESOP, which is as we talked about earlier, it is a technical tax structure Congress created 51 years ago that gives companies tax breaks to share ownership with workers. And I worked on one of these. It was in Rochester, New York, called Gleason Corporation. It makes machine tools, yeah. So that was the second thing. The first thing I worked on was a funds flow. So we don't do this anymore, but way back, 25 years ago, when you were selling a company, you'd take a young person like me, stick them in a broom closet, and you'd have them execute wire transfers related to the sale of a company. And those wire transfers basically took money from the buyer all the way to all the people who own the business. And some of those owners were employees. And at this company called Clark Schwabel, which was a semiconductor equipment company, the ownership actually went reasonably deep. And as you were conducting these wire transfers, the deeper you went, the smaller the dollar amounts were, the more emotional the individual was, because it was life-changing. Even if it was $20,000, $30,000, this was a life-impacting amount of money. And so that was another moment of God, what if you went all the way to the factory floor and everybody participated? So I'll stop there, but there's a whole bunch of things that happened that got me
So you have an example and we have a video. Do you want to talk about the example or do you want to show the video
Yeah,
first?
I'll tee it up real quick.
Okay.
So this is a company called Geostabilization that we acquired maybe 6 years ago. We just sold it. The company remediates landslide risk. So with changing weather patterns, there are more and more landslides around the country. And this company developed pretty cool technology and tools to hold the earth back. And their employees are construction workers who go in and do this work. They often do it on an emergency basis. A municipality calls, oh my God, this landslide's going to overtake the main road in our town. You got to be out here tomorrow, and the workers have to stay till it's done. So it's hard work, hard lifestyle, which meant workers were quitting constantly. They were rehiring their whole front line every 24 months. So hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people they would need to find to take this job. People would do it, quit. So what you're going to see is, and this is like a 2-minute video, so you're just going to get a snippet of it. But over that 5 or 6 year period of time, everyone became an owner in the business. The leadership team shared the business plan, shared financials. Workers got more control over their daily work. And there was a reason for people to stick around. And over years, the culture shifted. And people, I think the quit rate went from 50-some% to sub 15%, which is still higher than we would like, but we were now hiring hundreds of fewer people every year. And this is the exit when we sold the business to another financial firm. This was the company's, the employees being informed of what their stock was worth, and a part of the announcement was the new financial owner was repeating the program. So you'll see some of the workers were making hundreds of thousands of dollars, and now they could go do it again as an owner for the next 5 years.
It's a very special day for everybody in this room and the other 800 people around the organization.
Big news is we have sold the business to a great new partner.
GSI was founded in the concept of protecting people and infrastructure from the dangers of geohazards. Anything that would protect the traveling public.
The net profits of this business since 2018 are up almost threefold. And the bottom line is that we are better than ever before able to serve our customers and protect the public.
Huge round of applause for all of you. Thank you for everything that you've done.
All right, so what does that mean for all of you as owners?
So for our newest colleagues who just joined this year, the payout is $10,000.
I think like my jaw kind of dropped. And I was like, if the first year is like 10,000, like what is the second year gonna be?
If you joined in 2023, you will receive a payout of $20,000. If you joined in 2014 through 2018, you will receive a minimum payout of $175,000.
These are folks who have been with the business more than 10 years. So you joined GSI in 2013 or earlier. Payout is $275,000.
My goodness. I mean, I was kind of shocked, because I never had that much money in my life. With that money, I can get better future. It means really a lot to me now.
When you tell an employee, we value you, and then they turn around and actually show that, it was astonishing. Dreams that people didn't even know they had can now become a reality because of what was done today.
It fundamentally is both good business and it's the right thing to do.
Never in my wildest dreams did I think that we could grow the way that we've grown. This is just the start.
Okay, so you've come up with this formula to share the wealth, essentially. So all you need to do is come up with a new ownership structure, and then the company takes off? Or so it's formulaic, or do you need other aspects to stir into the stew?
I have to say, I can see how you and Rubenstein are good friends because you ask similar questions. So
I learned from him. So
that is why this is so hard. I wish it were the case that we just set up this ownership program and people were happier on the job and more engaged and less likely to quit. It's not what happens. People don't believe it. They don't trust you. There's a lot of water under the bridge between worker and owner or manager. And so it takes years and years and years of trust building. And it has to be about a lot more than stock ownership. You've got to share information. So, little things like even letting people know what the revenue and profits of the business are is a huge sign of trust when people see the financials and are like, wow, well, no one's ever shared information like that with us before. Or even the fact that we were going to sell the company. They knew before it was public, our workforce knew that this was coming. The way we build trust, and I don't want to get off on too big of a digression, but I can build trust with you in two ways, lots of ways, but two primary ways. I can share things with you that are confidential, or I can do what I say I'm going to do. And we do both of those things. So at the outset, when we buy a company and the quit rate's 50% and nobody's happy, and we encourage the leadership team to pre-commit themselves to change in a public way. Like, here's all the changes you're going to see. And that's really valuable. It's much more valuable than just going out and doing that because you're giving yourself a chance to do what you said you were going to do. And so there's lots of tools in there on how you build trust and get people to, engage in a different kind of way. But these cultures take years and years to take hold. And as I was saying in our earlier session, it doesn't always work. It's not magic. It's like sometimes we roll out the ownership program, and despite our best efforts of the leadership team and us giving all the same tools to that company, the culture doesn't shift. And quit rates go sideways, and engagement scores go sideways. So it doesn't get worse, but we spent all this money giving workers ownership and nothing happened. So that's our job for the next decade, is figure out why is it that these two similar companies in the same industry, kind of same setup, one gets this set of results and another gets a very different one.
And let me ask you another question. And I'm not being critical here because I was in the private equity industry for a large part of my career. I loved it. But you're very focused on the concept of empathy in leadership. And I would say that most people do not equate empathy and private equity in the same sentence. So why is it that you're focused on the concept of empathy, and what is that concept mean in leadership of companies for you?
Okay, so here's what happened. We've done this, rolled this type of program out with 70 companies at this point. And as I've said, I wish I could tell you every time the culture shifts. Doesn't happen. What I started to notice just anecdotally was there were categories of CEOs who did a really great job in shifting towards an ownership culture, as we call it. Workers feeling respected, trusted, included. And those categories were, and these are all like a little bit embarrassing to admit, but this is really how I was thinking. Like women did a better job. Like female leaders did a better job with this. Immigrants did a better job. People of deep religious faith did a better job. People who grew up poor. And so, you know, I was at a conference and I made a comment about this, and because people were saying like sometimes you have these great outcomes and you even acknowledge sometimes these cultures don't take hold. And I said, I think there's this common thread of empathy. You know, it's a generalization, but you know, women, people who grew up poor, immigrants, people of deep religious faith, like in general, would probably tend to be more empathic. So that got picked up, I think, by the Times or something, and just in some little blurb. And then a professor at Stanford named Jamil Zaki reached out to me, and he has studied empathy for his whole career. And he said, hey, I thought the blurb in the Times or wherever it was interesting, but I just want to understand, is your strategy, so I get this right, like, are you like seeking, you're going to like go find immigrants and women and people of deep religion, like that's how you're going to solve this problem, is like you want more empathic leaders, so you're going to follow this rigid construct, if that were even legal. And I said, I haven't figured it out. I was just kind of talking off the cuff. And he said, well, here's the good news. Empathy is a learned skill. And I said, I don't believe that. I don't believe a 55-year-old CEO can suddenly become more empathetic. And he said, well, let me share with you 50 years of research. It's like, this is settled science. It's not a debate. So thanks to him, and he's written some really cool books. One's called The War for Kindness, I would highly recommend. And one is called Hope for Cynics, if you have any interest in this topic. But he is now working with us to develop what he calls empathy gyms, which are how can we develop, and by the way, the fact that empathy is a learned skill should not have been so surprising to me because it's based on lived experience. Like the reason people who grew up poor are more empathic is because they know the other side, they've seen the other side of it. The women part I can't figure out. They just inherently have it, I guess. But so we are building these empathy gyms where, for example, people will go out. There's a group called the Financial Health Network that shows executives that other side. So we took a group of our CEOs and they went out and opened up got payday loans, tried to open up small dollar balance checking accounts, went to pawn shops. You know, like all this stuff you see in the movies, like this is going on. It's not, people really are that's how they're accessing the financial system in some cases. So there are things like that. There's a lot more that we're doing than that, but where we're trying to build empathy. And our hope is that over time, we can move leader empathy, which can be measured. I left out a big part of this, which is the reason the researcher got me so excited, is he came in and measured the empathy of our CEOs. And it's really cool, the test. You see like people's eyes only, and you are asked to assess their emotional state. And then you're also answering questions about yourself, and it's a long thing. But it gives you a composite score for empathy. So he had all of our CEOs, all of our empathy scores, and then we gave him all of the quit rates and engagement scores for those companies, and he correlated the two.
Wow.
And there was a massive correlation between more empathic leaders and people less likely to quit. So that was like, oh my God, well now we got to dive into this. And then now what we're hoping is we move leader empathy on a measured basis and we'll get better employee experience.
And you have a video on this as well, right? So
this video is really just to give you a sense for what does an empathic leader look and feel like. Because I'm now kind of getting smarter at, even before the test, you can kind of tell. And this is going to be one of our CEOs who runs 1-800-CONTACTS for us, named John Graham, amazing leader, super empathic person, as you'll see, and then Kathy Bullhouse, who runs a packaging company for us.
The thing that got me into management initially was because I like people. I think that's maybe part of the special sauce here. We get to just care about people. And what a great way to do that, right? To be able to offer people ownership and growth. This is as good as it can get.
I've had an impact on people's lives because I dared, because I, decided that I could do something that other people didn't think I could do. And I wish I could make it better for everyone. But I can make it better for some. I can make it better for our employees.
When you look across society right now, my sense is that so many people feel left behind and feel like the world is moving on without them. And I think this is a chance for us to say, we're not moving on without you. We're all coming along together.
Anyone who feels like an underdog, I want them to feel like anything is possible if you believe in yourself and you go for it and don't let anybody convince you otherwise.
I hope that by doing this, by sharing ownership, that it's a successful thing and that other companies look and say, we've got to do that, or we're going to be left behind.
This is about, creating the American dream, allowing employees to have this opportunity for the American dream. And what's wrong with that? This is the right thing. It's the right thing for all of us.
I feel so strongly this is going to work because I know our people, and they just care. It can change their lives, and so when you give people the chance to change their lives, I think they'll step up.
Okay. I have two final questions, then we're going to open it up. One is, so when I was at Carlisle, you were a competitor. I have a lot of friends at KKR, but we basically, I started the sustainability practice, and I thought that we were the best, and then kind of KKR took a little leadership position, which really used to bug me. But what are you doing now at KKR about sustainability given the change in the world?
In some respects, I don't have a full answer. Sustainability has a business case. This has a huge business case. So, within the bounds of the law, we're going to keep doing what we're doing.
Okay. My final question is, we have a lot of students here who want to get into private equity. AU is not typically a target school. It's, Carlisle, pretty much Harvard, Wharton, Stanford. So what's your advice for a student from AU who wants to get into private equity? How do they do it?
The most common path into private equity is through an investment bank. So the most frequent path would be 2 years in an investment bank and then kind of an analyst or associate role, which is a bit of like a 2-year training ground. So I would say if you're dead set on getting into private equity, your highest likelihood of success would be to go work at an investment bank. And it doesn't need to be Goldman Sachs. There's lots of investment banks out there, and you can get a great experience at lots of them. So that'd be the highest likelihood of getting where you want to go.
Great. Okay, so let's open it up to, do you have a question or do you want to give your brother a question? Okay. There's a future Eagle. She's in 6th grade, but.
Thank you for being here today, sir. So you talked a lot about empathy and how that goes into making a good leader, and some people maybe through the characteristics more. What impact does the founder have if he or she is the current CEO of the company? Because I feel like they would be maybe more invested in the overall company as opposed to someone who's maybe just a hired CEO or wasn't there from, say, the very beginning.
Gosh, that's a good question. I mean, I've seen some founders like our own founders, who started KKR in 1976 and have managed to build this behemoth of an investment firm and expand in ways I could have never imagined. Some founders kind of like tap out where they're like, I was great at getting us from here to here, and now I need to bring in professional management. The most important thing, whether it's a founder or a hired CEO, is that CEO sets the tone. So I'll just give you an example. When we bought that garage door company that I mentioned, and there were all of these safety problems, workers were getting hurt all over the place. They never measured employee engagement. The quit rate was high. The leader and even us as board members can help set the tone. So for example, when that CEO is meeting with his or her direct reports, is the first question about the financials or is it about safety? And if it's a month, let's say they have a great financial month and safety's a mess, what's the tone? So the person at the top controls so much of what people are focused on. Not only are they picking the metrics that everyone's tracking, but just the way they're engaging on an everyday basis. You know, does that leader have in the back of his or her pocket what the safety metrics are, what their big challenges are? Do they, and this is when I'm interviewing a CEO and they're in an existing position, I mean, these are the questions I'm asking, like, what are your engagement scores? And a lot of times it's like, I got to ask my HR person, what's your safety record? You know, why are people, when people are quitting, why are they choosing to leave? What are you doing about that? What did your last engagement survey tell you? What did you learn? So you can assess a lot of this without data. It helps if you have data, but you can assess a lot about a leader just through the questions you ask and how they respond.
Questions? Yes. Just introduce yourself and, you know.
Hi, my name is Tamara Johnson. I'm currently preparing my graduate experience on what we're talking about here today, so I'm really interested in everything you're talking about. I'm a forensic accounting major, so you would probably have to drag me to private equity, but I'm still interested. So I have a theoretical for you. Walmart is the single largest employer in the States, employing around 2.1 million people full-time, which is around 2% of the full-time employee population here in the US. And of that 2%, 25,000 plus people receive full SNAP and Medicaid benefits subsidized by the government. Due to Walmart's current capital structuring, if Walmart were to use either of your two foundations to restructure to not rely on those government subsidies due to their inability to pay full-time workers, it would redirect $1.2 billion annually back into the U.S. economy and away from Walmart. And if the top 5 offenders of this, it would be around $3 billion a year. If Walmart were to become a client in the near future, where would you start and why?
So I'll just make one comment about Walmart, and then I would rather talk generally. Walmart has taken stock ownership now all the way down to every store manager, and I think you will see, I hope you will see more over time. And it was a meaningful grant for store managers, and all these store managers worked their way up from the floor. But so just more generically, moving away from Walmart and talking about ownership and what it can do, it's not meant to be a replacement for wages at all. So what we don't want is people to say, well, $15 an hour is like not that great, but like if the stock works, you know, that's what we do. That's one thing for like Silicon Valley white collar people who, you know, are very sophisticated and they want to forego wages for ownership that could be worth a whole lot. That's not the program here. This is wages have to be acceptable, benefits have to be acceptable, and on top of that, as a free benefit that workers don't pay for and they don't give anything up to get, they get an ownership stake. And in exchange, if the company does a great job with this program, that company has a chance to have more engaged employees who are less likely to quit and then get all the resulting benefits around quality and customer satisfaction and warranty claims and everything that good that happens when workers are more engaged.
So I want to just flag 3 events coming up, 3 future speaker events before you all take finals. We have Christina on April 7th, Christina Wyatt, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer at Persephone, which is she's going to talk at the nexus of AI and sustainability. She's fantastic. April 22nd, Professor Vogel has organized a Game Changers of Sustainability Founders Forum with 3 food entrepreneurs, Hummus, Arepa, and Snackless. So, and we'll feed you. So, and then April 23rd, do we have any Tom Brady lovers or haters here? So we have the owner of Tampa Bay Buccaneers and former owner of Manchester United. They just sold it for $7 billion, Ed Glazer. So if you want to, no? He still owns it, okay. They sold part of it for $7 billion. So Ed Glazer will be here so you can come tell him who to draft next year. So Pete Stavros, thank you very much. This was incredible. You've shown us the empathetic side of private equity and how to be a change maker all in one. So thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
That's great.
All right, thanks.
Thank you very
Thanks a
much.
lot.
It's fantastic.